Hello, this is the Landscape Ontario podcast. Today we are featuring the audio from the latest LO Task Force Town Hall webinar. On April 14th, the task force was joined by public policy and government relations expert Julie Garner from Earnscliffe Strategy Group. Julie goes through the major government programs that are set up for employers, including the wage subsidy program and WorkShare, among others. So stay tuned for that. And if you'd like to watch this as a video instead, visit Landscape Ontario's YouTube channel. Also, be sure to check out all the COVID-19 resources LO has at horttrades.com. And while you're there, register for the weekly town hall webinars, which take place every Tuesday at 10 a.m. But first, we hope you enjoy the town hall webinar from April 14th, 2020. The Landscape Ontario podcast is sponsored by Dynascape Software. LO members save 15% on Dynascape products, software upgrades, and online training. Visit dynascape.com for details.
And we are live. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony DiGiovanni. I'm the Executive Director of Landscape Ontario. We are hosting this town hall webinar every Tuesday at 10 a.m. to give you the opportunity to ask questions, share information, and generally help and support each other through this COVID crisis. Our presenters are members of our COVID task force. The task force meets daily to monitor the situation and to develop strategies aimed at helping you weather this significant storm. Task force members include Alan White, who's the chair, Jeff Olson, John Dursey, David Wright, who's the president of Landscape Ontario, Peter Ganane, Margot Byers, Terry Childs, Lindsay Ross, and Jamie Riddell. They are supported by Landscape Ontario and CNLA staff. These individuals are all facing the same issues you are, and yet they have stepped up to provide leadership and guidance. I know you join me in thanking them for their immense contributions. Today, in addition to answering your questions and concerns, we have a special guest. Julie Garner is from a government relations firm called Earnscliffe. Earnscliffe is providing Landscape Ontario guidance as we speak to politicians about why our profession can be part of the solution, why we need to work, and why we are able to work safely. However, today, Julie will focus her presentation on government support programs. All of you have been significantly impacted by the COVID crisis, and the government has announced many programs to support you and your employees. Julie will help us clarify what those programs are and how you can access them. After Julie's presentation, the task force and Julie will answer your questions. So without further introduction, Julie, maybe you want to talk a little bit about yourself and then go on to your presentation.
Sure. Thanks very much, Tony, and thank you to Landscape Ontario and all your members for having me here today. It's been a pleasure for me to work with Landscape Ontario for the last while. We initially became acquainted with one another around the snow and ice insurance issues, and then March 15th hit, and we've been thrown into the COVID crisis as well. For our firm across the board, we've been trying to support businesses and organizations that we serve, as well as others, to make sure that they can navigate the immense amount of information that's coming from government on a regular basis and be able to make appropriate decisions for their businesses. So the presentation that I'm going to go through today is an overview of all the different programs, including the wage subsidy details, which were finalized over the weekend. I don't have all of the answers, but certainly our firm and our team has regular connects on a daily basis with the Ministry of Economic Development at the provincial level, as well as the federal level with ISED. We're on daily calls with them at 11 o'clock each morning, and we can certainly feed in a lot of the questions and answers, and we see a lot of the questions and answers that are being asked by business owners and organizations across the country. We've been feeding in information and questions from Landscape Ontario and trying to get folks answers around the different loan programs, the essential services list, as well as the wage subsidy and sort of the gross revenue calculations. So we've been doing that already, and we'll continue to do it. So if I don't have the answers for you today, we certainly will be making a list and continuing to feed those in. And so I'm going to set up the presentation now, and we'll get started. Okay, so here we are. Here's here. out of the way to be able to. So we've called this Connecting the Dots. It's also a brief that we're putting out on a regular basis. There'll be an updated version today that will be in print that we'll send to Landscape Ontario, and certainly they'll be able to pull from it the relevant information that they want to circulate to members, which will contain a lot more detail and links to the various application portals so that folks can have the information at their fingertips about how to access all of these programs. My affiliation, and certainly a little bit more about me, Tony had mentioned that I'm a principal with Earnscliffe Strategy Group, which is a national government relations and public affairs firm. I am a Waterloo Region resident and certainly linked to the landscape industry, as my husband owns a landscape construction, retail, and maintenance firm. So this issue certainly from your perspectives is one that I'm seeing on a daily basis within my home, which has been great in terms of really understanding and being able to embrace some of the challenges that your organizations are facing. I have 3 little girls, as you can see. They are here with me, but have been appropriately asked to remain silent and out of this conversation. The big thing in terms of where to start for information, there's a ton coming and there's a ton changing. We find that every time that we put out a new edition of the Connecting the Dots brief, it's outdated within a half an hour with some new program or resource being updated, or a new program detail being added to one of the signature programs that has been released by the province of Ontario. Where to start for information, the Government of Canada actually has a fairly decent portal which is linking to all the provincial resources, and in certain cases municipal resources, because there are programs at every level of government right now, as you well know, and interpretations are different across the board depending on which jurisdiction you're in. Certainly the Government of Canada is one of the best places. Also, you've got an incredible resource in your COVID portal on the Landscape Ontario website, which contains a lot of the information and really tailored to your organizations. As far as kind of financial supports for business and individuals, the key program and the main program that's been talked about over the last week and a half is the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy Program. That is the 75% wage subsidy for businesses that was before Parliament over the weekend and passed with unanimous support. This program will provide up to 75% wage subsidy for businesses experiencing a revenue decrease of 30% or more for the April and May periods, and the 15% decrease for March. What the government has done, and what the terms kind of that were finalized over the weekend, is the change in the 15% versus 30% that needs to be shown for March. As well, they passed criteria that would allow businesses to choose one of 2 options for where that decrease is shown. So companies can either show the decrease from year over year, so March, the same period of March 15th to April 11th from 2019, or they can choose an average of the revenue from January or February. If you choose the January or February option, it must be used consistently for any other months that you apply for the wage subsidy. So you can't flip between the January or February for the period of March and then switch if you're applying in April or May. You have to kind of keep consistent with either going for the previous year's revenue or a January, February option, but it certainly does allow businesses to have a little bit more flexibility, especially if they've made some either sizable increases in their business for the 2020 year that have caused their revenue to go up, but also their expenses. The program, as you're probably aware, is not tied to the number of employees. Big corporations, not-for-profits, and small, medium-sized enterprises can qualify. It is going to be taken on an average of the employees' wages for the period that is in question, and employers will be responsible for reporting that. The program will not apply to those that have been unemployed for a period of 14 days or more. That's when the next program, or the individual program, the emergency relief benefit, will kick in for those employees for the period in question. Another important detail is that businesses are going to have to update this on a monthly basis, similar to the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit. It is just for a time period, and then businesses will have to go in on a monthly basis when the next time period opens up to do the same reporting as previous. I'm going to leave it there. I do anticipate there'll be a number of questions. There is one more detail that I will report, and that is that there had been a lot of questions around whether or not T5 income or dividend income could be reported or could be utilized to qualify for the wage subsidy. It's been an active question at the federal government right now. They have made the decision that it actually has to be wages that are part of the calculation, that dividend revenue will not qualify for this particular program. But they are continuing to look at the issue, as they do recognize that it will impact a lot of small businesses, and certainly the business chain as sole proprietors record income in many different ways, and they do not want to cut the sole proprietors out of the equation. So we do expect that there will be new programs, but this one won't qualify for that type of income.
Julie, can I just interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
So Rafi Hanneman asks, does the 75% wage subsidy include company owners who are on payroll?
It will if you're on payroll, it will, because you are recording regular wages. It won't if you don't take a regular kind of reported income. And the way the program will work is it will actually work as though it's a tax refund, and that's how it will be triggered. It will be essentially in their back-end system as though you've overpaid your taxes, and then the government will issue a refund. Are there any other quick questions on that one before I move on?
No, I think it's helpful for the members to know, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's all done through your My Business portal, through CRA and your payroll system. So if anybody that's, my understanding anyway, is that anybody that issues a regular paycheck would already be in that system and already have history. So I think I read the arm's length piece with an owner. It has to be history before March 15th. You can't all of a sudden add yourself to the payroll.
Right. Yeah, because you will be reporting from those payroll periods and as well. So it does have to be history. And in terms of companies that aren't set up, most are, but we have heard issues around companies that aren't set up on the My Business portal. It is a bit of a time-consuming process, especially because the completion of the portal process does require them to mail out a PIN number to you for you to get on. I'm not aware that they've addressed that issue. It is something we fed in that is problematic. The My Business portal worked exceptionally well for the emergency relief benefit for the My account for the CRA. It will likely work very seamlessly for business owners as well, but that first step is getting on. So if you're not registered right now, start the process immediately so that this can make it much easier for you.
Julie, James Walk's asking how long until they issue the refund? So how soon can they refund? How soon will the refund come?
So we expect, so the program was just passed over the weekend. We expect it to go live very soon. There's a meeting happening within an hour with the Minister of Small Business, which should clarify the timeline and exactly when it will be opened up. Government is working towards a 3 to 6 week timeline to get money. They recognize that people are in a cash flow crisis, and they're working towards the 3-week end of that as a goal, but are giving themselves the cushion of longer.
Thank you. And Atelio's asking, do you know if it applies to commissioned sales teams?
Just let me pull one second. It doesn't include bonuses. It's regular revenue. I have the specifics here. It's the wage level exclusive of bonuses. Exclusive of bonuses above baseline pay, retirement allowance, or direct or indirect loans, or any front-end loaded remuneration schemes that have a higher value. It's the January to March 15th pay with the expectation of lower work. So if that commission is recorded sort of as in a payroll remittance format, it could qualify for it, but it looks as though it certainly wouldn't from a bonus standpoint.
Tony, Oh, go ahead, Tony. I was just going to say
Brenda's asking, is a tax refund on a source deduction payments? Maybe you can clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's a great
Sure, what
question.
that means.
It won't be on the source deductions. That was what they were originally going to do for kind of what I'm going to talk to next, which is the 10% small business subsidy. It is going to be, certainly that information is going to be important for the calculation, but it will be issued as though it's a refund check to you. Not as an amount of money that you take off what you're going to remit later.
And Jackie Hart, please review the average January, February versus decrease. And it's saying not clear.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So I'll go through that, and then unless there's anything else urgent, I should probably move on because there's quite a bit more content, and then we can come back to all of these. So the average January and February. So it's where they've gone in terms of the flexibility. They heard from a lot of employers that have scaled up over this past year, and that if your comparable was the year previous only, that many businesses that should qualify wouldn't qualify. And so what they opened up was the ability for a business to elect to either show the revenue drop based on a comparison between March 2020 revenue versus March 2019 revenue, or the option of doing it in comparison to what an average of your gross revenue between January and February would be. So they've pooled those two periods together to try and reduce the fraud and ability to kind of monkey around with the program. So they're asking you to basically add your gross revenue for January, add your gross revenue for February, divide that by 2, and that'll be the number that you compare to and show your loss against.
Okay. So Julie, do you want to take more questions, or did you want to move on to other programs? Because
I want to move on to other programs just because this one I know will dominate and it could actually dominate our time. So I'll try and go through the rest of them quickly because with there's enough clarity to cover off sort of the low-hanging fruit, and then we'll move to questions exclusively.
Great. And I would like to ask the attendees to focus your questions on the benefit programs. It just makes it a lot easier to focus our attention, because that's what the program is right now. And we can deal with the other questions later on afterwards. So thank you.
Great. So in addition to the 75% wage subsidy, the businesses and small businesses that qualify for a small business deduction are still eligible for the 10% small business subsidy. So this program was announced before the wage subsidy, and some of you may already be receiving it. This one is a remittance, is tied to the remittance that you would pay for your source deductions. And it does allow that 10% to be removed from the amount paid into the government. It is for individuals, partnerships, nonprofits, charities, or Canadian-controlled private corporations. And it does link to the wage subsidy in the sense that if you're already receiving the 10% subsidy, it will be kind of subtracted off of the amount that you will receive from the Canadian Emergency wage subsidy through the main program. So they do link together. You don't need to stop, from what I understand, applying for the small business subsidy, how it will work in the portal, but they are linked together. And certainly if you are receiving that already, it will be factored into the equation. Also, if you aren't receiving that because if you aren't going to be applying for the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, because maybe your revenue is stable, this is still a program that is available to you, and it is not tied to a revenue decrease in any way, shape, or form. So there is a difference there for businesses that are simply hurting through this and maybe have experienced a smaller revenue decline to make them ineligible for the larger wage subsidy. This one still is available. Work sharing is an active discussion right now. Certainly some businesses, and certainly this applies to the landscape, where certain parts of operations are open and certain ones are not open at this point in time because of the essential workplaces list. Work sharing is a program that pays for a an hours reduction and an hours reduction over normal for businesses experiencing some extraordinary circumstances. The program normally requires a very robust kind of reporting agreement to be signed. They've eased some of the rules to provide benefits to workers who agree to reduce their hours. It has to be a uniform reduction in hours across your workforce, so everybody by 10%, and then that 10% would be compensated by the government at a level of 55% of their average wages. There is no requirement to submit kind of economic data to support the program in the new rules that have been put forward, and it certainly is available to all kind of businesses regardless of how you are supporting. The interesting thing is, though, it does link to the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, because the new criteria for that is that that employees are able to receive that benefit and still work up to 10 hours and be paid by their employer. So if you are looking at a work sharing arrangement or kind of reducing the hours of your workforce, there are sort of two options available to you right now. But obviously the wage subsidy appears to be the best program for qualifying employers that want to continue to keep their workforce on, but might not necessarily be employing them at full capacity. Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. This is Relief Response Benefit was opened up last week. It was opened up at the beginning of the week. We've had millions of Canadians that have applied for the program. It's off to a fairly good start in terms of the seamless process. So if your employees are on it, I'm sure that they've reported that it's really a three-screen process to go through. As I mentioned just a moment ago, you are able to have your employees laid off and receiving the emergency benefit, and also working up to 10 hours in your business. This program will be available for 4 months, and then those employees that, if they are continue to be laid off, will be eligible to be transferred into the EI program. And it should be kind of noted, and I'm sure that people are pretty familiar with this program already, but certainly if those had applied for EI and hadn't started receiving it, they've automatically been moved over to this emergency response benefit or relief benefit program, and we'll continue to receive it for the 4-month period as long as they reapply on a month-to-month basis. Tax and expense deferral. There's been a number of tax and expense deferrals offered by all levels of government. So I can't speak to every municipality, but certainly the CRA is allowing businesses to defer tax payments with no penalty or interest until August 31st, 2020. Also, any installments that would be due are certainly also going to be at the discretion of the employer, and there will not be any interest charged if those businesses are not making those installment payments. In terms of the GST, HST, there is a deferral there for till June 30th, 2020. And certainly that'll be an equivalent of about a $30 billion program. At the provincial level, there's also tax deferrals at the provincial level with no penalties. Again, same deadline of the August 31st, 2020. And we are also seeing WSIB remittances deferred till August 31, meaning that if you had Q1 remittances that were due, they can be deferred with no interest or penalty till August 31st. The real benefit there will be if you're not accruing as many premiums for the WSIB over the next period, that essentially once ideally businesses are up and running and from a cash flow basis, those payments will become due. At a municipal level, we're seeing a lot of municipalities deferring property taxes and utility bills when the utility is municipally owned for a 60-day period. That's what's consistent. That's what's been most consistent. As well, there's been some permitting suspended within the municipalities and more allowance at that level as well. From a business loans, the big program that most smaller businesses and medium-sized enterprises have been talking about is the loan, the $40,000 loan that's available through the banks and being administered through the banks. This program allows businesses with payrolls between $50,000 and $1 million to apply for a $40,000 loan. It'll be interest and principal payment free for the first year and guaranteed by the government of Canada. The program, certainly as people are testing it out and applying, what they're finding is that the banks are still not going to loan money to businesses where they don't believe that there's going to be a reasonable chance of getting the money back, even with the government guarantee. And so there have been some hiccups there. Be very interested if you're hearing or having difficulty accessing the program for odd reasons. Certainly feed that information into the task force and they can get it to us and we can see whether or not we can sort things out. One of the big questions that's been asked around this program is around the dividend income, because many small businesses don't actually take, don't actually put themselves on salary. And so they're wanting access to this program. That's a question that's being actively considered in terms of how they would potentially open up this criteria, but it is not open yet. The other kind of component of this is that there is a $10,000 amount that will be forgiven if the entire principal, if the remaining principal is paid off by December of 2022. So certainly for businesses that do anticipate to be able to need this for their short-term operational costs and things that cannot be deferred, it's a great program and potentially might benefit you greatly, ideally when the economy is up and running again, especially if you can pay off that $30,000 and be able to accept the deferral or the forgiveness for that $10,000 amount. There will be some other programs rolling out for loan guarantees for small and medium-sized enterprises. Those are expected to roll out mid-month, and those will be run through the Business Development Corporation and EDC Canada. And so as those details become available, again, we'll be circulating the information in our Connecting the Dots memo and be circulating it to Landscape Ontario. Mortgage deferral, and I'll talk about commercial rents here as well. Certainly, there's been, the Canadian banks have made a commitment to support businesses and individuals through these times through mortgage deferral. Businesses and individuals can apply for these things, but there could be penalties as well as interest associated with that. So we are hearing unfortunate stories of that happening across the board. But certainly if folks are in an operational cash issue, then they are potentially able to apply for a deferral to ease their burden at this point in time and get through this period. The one thing in terms of commercial rents that has been a big topic of discussion with the federal government in these calls on a daily basis, there has been no solution found yet for how to deal with commercial rents, but it will remain an active issue as it is highly problematic. And certainly I think landlords across the board, from what we've been hearing, there's some that have been responsive and some unresponsive to their tenants. The challenge is those are businesses as well. And so how to make sure that we don't cause an unintended chain reaction is something that they're actively considering. Essential services designation. I know this isn't where we're going to focus today, but I did want to mention, essentially, we saw last Friday, the Premier come out with a more restrictive essential services designation list in Ontario. That list, from what we understand, is going to be active for about a 3-week period, and then they're going to revisit it. Sorry, it was April the 3rd that the Premier came out with this list. And so we're really in kind of, we're almost kind of nearing week 2 here, and then next week is when we're expecting that things will be relooked at. The province did announce last week that they had appointed a post-COVID economic recovery task force, which is made up largely of cabinet members in Ontario that will be dealing with kind of how do we get back on our feet. The key things they're going to be looking at is kind of when is it safe to open up business. And so certainly we're working very closely with Landscape Ontario, and we'll be wanting to advocate for the safe reopening of landscape operations where possible. And so doing that in a respectful manner that puts Ontarians and Canadians first, that won't see us back in a March 15th situation of complete lockdown of the province because of inappropriate activities. So I think there's lots of opportunity here for landscape, and certainly it'll continue to be an active conversation. Quebec added landscape to the list just recently, and so certainly the provinces have been collaborating very closely and working together very closely over this period, and certainly are looking at the reactions of their citizens in other jurisdictions to different moves, but also are looking at what others are doing as appropriate guidance. Quebec had been one of the most restrictive in their essential services designation, especially in the construction landscape early on. So this is a really interesting move that they've opened this up. Temporary foreign workers just over the weekend, and some of your operations may hire temporary foreign workers in it. The government did announce that there would be $1,500 for employers per employee for employers that employ temporary foreign workers who will have to be subject to the 14-day quarantine once they come into the country. I am still looking to make sure that this will apply to those in the landscape sector. Certainly it will apply to those that are growing because they fit squarely in, but whether or not all the designations for those employing temporary foreign workers will receive the funding is still a question that I'm ironing out, but certainly it is there for some, for sure, and we'll get you further information on that. The other program that might be of interest, or that was announced last week, was the Canada Summer Job Subsidy, and this was that 100% of the wages will be covered for students hired through the Canada Summer Jobs program. This program, the application process is currently closed. It is one that launches early February, I believe, and closes kind of early March. Certainly the program objectives are that you're providing really quality work experiences for youth, and many landscape employers may have applied already for this program. It typically would provide 50% of the wage in subsidy if you're a for-profit operation. The program's been bumped up to 100% of wages covered. So if you have applied for this program, certainly there's a greater benefit coming your way if you are successful, and the notifications for that will go out in May. Lastly, and this is a really interesting one, is that all levels of government are really looking for businesses to step up. If there are things that you can be doing to support Canada through this crisis, either to sell to government or to donate to government, certainly they're looking for all information available, and there's a number of different portals. At the federal government level, it's the buyandsell.gc.ca. In Ontario, it's the Ontario Together. Ontario Together has also set up a $50 million fund that if a business feels that they could manufacture something specifically in the personal protective equipment space, they will gladly help that business retool their operation and provide for allowable capital expenditures to get that investment made and the PPE being made. I can say I was on a number of calls over the weekend trying to get an operation set up to develop masks, and the government of Ontario is very serious about this. And so if there are any opportunities out there, they want to know and they want to help. So, certainly, please make sure that Tony and others are available. You guys may be set up in a way that might allow you to contribute to this effort. And certainly there's a number of different products that they're looking for that are listed on these websites. Call for volunteers is also up there. There, certainly are a number of interesting kind of opportunities, even up to tracking how COVID is spreading across Ontario, that they're calling for volunteers. They're also calling for retired healthcare professionals to help in long-term care homes and other healthcare situations. So certainly may not be necessarily applicable directly to you, but maybe someone in your family, and certainly wanted to make sure that that you were aware of the immense call for volunteers across the board to help Canada and Ontario through this crisis. So that is the end of the presentation. Wanted to leave as much time as we possibly could for questions. And with that in mind, I will end this and return to our regular screens so that we can continue our discussion.
Julie, thank you for the great overview of the amazing programs that are available to support the businesses and employees. There are a number of unanswered questions that I think we should get to. And the first one's from Joanne Turner. The owners don't pay EI but get regular wages. Can they collect? So that's referring to the
not
75%
tied
program. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a great question, but yes, you can. It is not tied to your EI, your previous EI contributions.
Okay. And Chris, your card, if my expenses are up and revenue stayed the same, not down 30%, is it based on profit or sales or revenue?
My understanding is it's based on gross revenue.
Johan Bozers, is it only valid on employees currently employed, not on the ones that have not started yet?
So the amount of wage subsidy that you would get would be what you have paid for. So the employees have to be kind of working for 14 days. So you wouldn't be able to kind of prepay it. It's all retroactive in terms of the payment. Even the first pay period is for the period of March 15th till April 11th. Then the next will be the 12th to the 9th of May, and then the subsequent into June. So it'll all be retroactive, and it has to be on actually what has been paid and received by employees.
Ken's asking, what is available for businesses with 0 employees?
So it would really depend on the situation. So if there are 0 employees, but an employer that is perhaps just, this whole proprietor type of situation, the business loan, the $40,000 business loan might be available to you at some point. We are trying
you're frozen.
Track down. I'm frozen?
You were, for me anyway. So you're good? Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So there will potentially be that program. There's also the 10% subsidy. So the 10% wage subsidy that would be available regardless of how many employees that you have. It would just cover if you're remitting on behalf of yourself.
Tony, I have a quick question here while you go through those, if I could, Julie. With the tax deferrals and WSIB, should employers be remitting their reports, even though they're deferring payments?
Yeah, so the forms, they definitely continue to submit your forms, but if you don't have a payment associated with it, it'll be what I understand from the WSIB program is that you'll be automatically assumed to have deferred payment, and there'll be no interest or penalty applied.
Thanks.
If I could add to that, just to for keeping business continuity going, is to be setting aside that money that you owe. Do that now instead of waiting until August when you owe a big chunk of money and don't have the cash flow to cover it. So set aside that money that you owe now. You keep it in a separate bank account, just so that you're not, as James Walk said, it's not a grenade in your lap in August.
Yeah, a little bit. You're taking advantage too of the fact that you might have had income, especially snow contractors or others, owe a whole bunch of money this spring. If you defer it, then there'd be a difference on that quarter come August. So the amount you'd be remitting with any losses between now and then would be offset by that payment.
Jackie has a question. Can you get the 10% small business subsidy plus the Qs?
Yeah, so you can, but it won't be 85%. So it'll still, the maximum available is still the 75%, even if you're getting them through the different programs. So many small businesses have already started to apply or started to use the small business deduction. And so in that case, it will be, I assume, a question as part of the application process if you're applying it, and it'll factor into the calculation. It'll be essentially 65% of the wage subsidy will come to you through the check or the reimbursement, and then the other will be a deduction from your source deductions.
Brenda's saying, so we should just report the source deductions that would be due. And I've lost her now. This is moving so quickly.
That's what I understand, is that it's going to be calculated on your source deductions when you choose to pay them. So there is obviously, there is a deferral right now at the federal government level in terms of what you would owe. So it will be an accounting, as your colleagues and the task force members on here have said. If you are not going to pay them because you want to defer that, then just make sure you properly account for it and remove the 10% eligibility.
Brian Cotter, is the 75% wage subsidy same as the 10% treated as income to the company and taxable to the company at the end of the year?
In terms of the subsidy, from what I understand, is there will be no sort of CPP or EI taken off the wage subsidy. So those won't be kind of, here you go, and you're going to get hit with additional source deductions if you are receiving the wage subsidy. But it won't be obvious. It won't be treated as though it was your money that was paid out. So from a tax perspective, yeah, I'm not an accountant, but you will certainly, I don't believe it will be counted as income on the business, but again, you won't have that expense, so it will have an impact on your net income.
I think Tony, for the answer to that question, it works as money in, money out because it's directly related to the expense. You show 100% payroll expense at the same time as the income comes in, so the two kind of wash each other. You can't put it as a income into your account and accumulate it.
Both Rafi and Noreen have similar questions. So we can pay our staff that are on the CERB 10 hours with no penalty. Is that true?
Yes. Yes. So the penalty, yes, you can pay them and no penalty to them in terms of their CERB being revoked.
Okay. And is the 75% wage subsidy taxable income for the corporation?
I'll have to double check on that. I'll have to double check on that for you.
Okay. There's also a related question to the 10 hours. Is that monthly or weekly? So 10 hours in a business. So I'm sorry, I missed it. Did you say that they are able to work up to 10 hours? You did. In the business and still receive the benefit. Is that monthly or weekly?
It's weekly.
Weekly, okay. Let's see.
One question that I didn't cover in my presentation, Tony, while you're mining those, is the 25% top up. That's a commonly asked question about, do I have to pay that? And certainly the government of Canada is hoping that employers will be in a position to pay the remaining 25% of the top up to their employees. The overall goal is that as many Canadians stay employed as possible. If a business cannot, there won't be a requirement to prove that you did or a test that you're going to. It will be, certainly a choice for businesses in an ideal scenario.
I was going to ask you about that, Julie, just to qualify as that goes through, because it's going through your payroll. You have to show what you paid your employee, and then they give you, my understanding was they give you 75% of whatever you paid them as money back to the company. So I wasn't sure when I heard the Prime Minister talking about that, how it actually, you would take away the 25%, because if I paid my employee 25% less, then they're giving me 75% of the now 75%. All because it's going through your payroll portal. So it's not a separate transaction outside of your payroll.
Right. And so it's a really, it's somewhat complicated, but for the business owners on here, it's not. If you do that, if you paid 100% for March and March 15th to April 11th, you'll get 75% of that. If you pay 75% between April 12th and May 9th, you're going to get 75% of that amount, which will be not the same as it was the month previous. So it'll be 75% of what you've paid in your
What you reported.
Yeah.
Carla's asking, do you need to apply for deferred payments?
No, you don't need to apply for the deferred payments. For the most part, whether municipalities have different requirements in there, I'm not 100% sure, but in terms of the provincial and federal taxes, you do not.
Quick question, Julie, is this CERB program, that money is coming to the employees without any taxes taken. Those taxes will be required come reporting of their income at the end of 2020, correct?
Absolutely, and it's really important that you remind employees of this. It certainly is something for those that have kids on the call. The same thing applies when you have a little one. And there's been many families that have been stung at the end of the year, realizing that they have, a couple of $1,000s in taxes owing that they weren't prepared for.
Thanks.
So is the CERB program, he said it was 4 months, right? CERB program will last 4 months. You have to apply for it monthly? You
do, and I'll cover off a question that I'm also seeing from Kenny here in terms of, Kenny and Everett around kind of the self-employed. The CERB program is available to anyone that has stopped working for the last 14 days. And so essentially the attestation in terms of income and stop work is on there, but you would be eligible. It is not, again, tied to EI eligibility rules and is available for sole proprietors and small businesses. So CERB is available for those situations, and you do have to go on monthly. Again, it's a 3-screen quick process through your My Account, your personal account portal, and essentially it's just a drop-down list of which month you're applying for when you stopped working, and a submit.
James is asking of the loan program, is the loan money in the bank, or is it a line of credit that is accessed when you're out of money? How does that work?
It'll be a line of credit, but essentially it'll be a $40,000 line of credit that you will be able to spend at your discretion. So you don't have to, similar to any other line of credit in your account, you can choose where you pull the money to pay for your costs. It goes through that, and every bank has their own kind of information set up. What I understand is credit unions weren't initially part of the program, but they're being set up as well.
Sam's just relaying her experience. She applied on Thursday and it's up and running as of this morning. That's fairly quick. Jody, can self-employed designers do small amounts of work and still collect CERB in the same way as someone's working 10 hours a week?
I imagine that you can. It's the first time I've gotten that question, but the 10 hours per week is on there. So provided that you're, it's a reasonable amount of money. This program is intended to be simple in its administration and supporting Canadians. So you do have to sign some attestations, but it's pretty open.
Tony, quick question to Julie. Do you have any indication with the 75% wage subsidy when employers might see that money back? A big question is cash flow. So if they're paying out 100% of the wages right now, it can drain some companies' bank accounts rather quickly. What indications do you have from the government of one, when that money might start to flow, but two, is it going to be like CERB where it's a fairly quick replenishment of your cash so that you can maintain proper cash flow?
It won't be as quick as CERB. CERB's up to 3 days for people who have direct deposit, which is great. I've never seen government work this fast. But it is intended to be ideally 3 weeks. So from application 3 weeks, they are saying 3 to 6, but we know that they understand, and they've been hearing from a lot of small businesses that cash flow is really in a crunch right now, and they need to get it out fast.
Did you see Brenda's question? The comparison to January and February is not helpful for many garden centers as that is their quiet time normally. So they need to compare to previous year. Can you switch 10% for March to 75% for April and May if they qualify comparing to previous years on that basis only? We're getting the gist of that question?
I got it in yes.
What I understand is that you have to either select you're going to compare to January, February for all reporting periods, or do the March to March, April to April, May to May. Certainly that if that's the question, if the desire is to go from January, February as a comparable for March and then flip, certainly that's an argument that could be made.
Jeff, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. We're in a seasonal business too, with like limited revenue in January, February, and March. So the 15%, it's 15% in March, and then 30% in April and May.
Correct.
And so yeah, you're comparing year against year, not month against month in these seasonal businesses. So they've done it both ways, so that you can, if you're in a really seasonal business, you can do it on last year. But if you're in a month-to-month business, then you can do your sales drop monthly.
Okay,
make
thank
sense?
you. Okay, Eddie's asking, what if you missed the minimum of the 50,000 payroll? Using subs keeps our payroll low, but monthly overhead is still significant. How do you deal with that kind of operation?
From what I understand for that loan program, it's a 50,000 minimum in terms of the payroll. The big outstanding question is whether or not, other sources of revenue like dividend income could be qualified. But from what I've heard, that is the minimum for the qualification for those $40,000 loans.
Okay.
Doug Ford did say that there's a lot of businesses out there, small business, that is slipping through the cracks, and I'm seeing that. We're seeing that. It's happening. He said that he's going to look after those people, but I haven't heard any programs yet that have been specifically for that. But he says he's going to look after us.
Yeah, certainly they continue to roll out programs. The federal government as well realizes when they drew the line in the sand that it had to be actual payroll, reported, that they were cutting out a lot of small businesses, and certainly chambers and associations and many others are raising that in terms of the really small businesses that keep the engine of our economy going. So between the federal government and the province, they certainly are aware of the issue. What they will do about it still remains a question.
Julie, a question as it relates to employees that are either on CERB program, EI programs, sub program. A lot of employees, particularly in seasonal businesses, were on 13-week layoff over winter. Normally coming back April 1st. Is there any talk at the government level, particularly the federal level, what happens to these employees when they reach the end of their normal term? Or if they move over into CERB, how long does that go before typical employment standards kick in? Namely constructive dismissal or other things like that employers should be aware, or government's hopefully working on, so it doesn't fit the normal rules.
Yeah, it's an odd one, because what would happen, unfortunately, to those employees, if they are able to answer the question that they are not able to get employment now, there is some changing criteria that it is not up yet on their website. So this is a question. Similar seasonal employees are kind of similar to students in a way, that won't be able to kind of get their employment because of the COVID-19 crisis. And so what I understand is they're looking at that, in particular around the student question, and making sure that you don't necessarily need to have been laid off because of COVID. for these types of issues. So as the new guidelines are published and whether or not they do apply to seasonal workers, we will update you. But for right now, according to the program criteria that is published, it says that you have to either have been laid off or terminated because of COVID-19, which does create a difficult situation for those employees that would have otherwise been hired back at this particular point in time.
Welwyn's question is, and a statement. My staff my suspended staff has applied yesterday, and they had to attest that they would not be working while receiving the CARB. Are you sure that we can still employ them for up to 10 hours while on CERB? And with whom can she confirm that? Because they had to make that attestation.
You know, I will have to get back to you today. It's one of the questions that we had in the queue for the session that was happening, or that's happening in 5 minutes with Minister Ng, and that is when these new criteria are going to be up, because they did, the Prime Minister did announce last week, and it was reconfirmed in the cabinet briefings that 10 hours is permittable. But obviously, as a business owner, you want to make sure that you're not going to be disadvantaging your employees or putting them in harm by saying this to them. You want it in black and white. So what I can say is that we'll get those criteria to you in black and white as soon as we possibly can. And certainly we're alive to the question because it's one, especially with the landscape industry right now, it's very important.
Super.
Julie, can I ask a question here for a second?
Sure.
These programs often have unintended consequences, and some of them being things like when you're trying to call employees back to work, they're making more money sitting at home. And also, I did have a question about students, and my understanding is on the CERB that the qualification is if you made $5,000 in the past 12 months, then you can qualify for the CERB. Is that correct? And second to that, a lot of university students, et cetera, made $5,000 last summer. They'll be applying for this and getting it and not wanting to go back to work. Is that your understanding as well?
It's a challenge, and it's a huge challenge, and there's huge challenges with CERB in other sectors as well. I mean, long-term care workers make $16 an hour. Put your health at risk for $2,100, or stay home with your family where you're safe and work. So they're certainly looking at a lot of these issues. As far as the students go, I guess so there's two things. There's the $5,000 is apparently going to be waived. So that'll be part of the kind of reissue and the criteria in terms of whether or not you had to have that income. It was a problematic criteria that they are, I guess, removing now, which will allow a lot more people to qualify. On the student front, if they do allow the students to get hired, certainly it will provide them a benefit in March, April, for April, May, and June, but it won't provide it for the remainder of the summer. There is an ability for the minister to add on another period, which obviously would have an impact on those students and their employability. It's not a question that I can answer. It is probably an unintended consequence. Hopefully students feel that being employed and having things to show on their resume is the better long-term play, but some won't.
So Julie, I want to change the subject just a bit, but it is related. And I want to talk about how we as a profession, as an industry, get back to work. We've had, there's a lot of division in the association right now because of the unclear nature of the essential workplaces list. And I'd love to change, the task force is wanting to change the channel. It's time for us to work together. It's time for us to go forward, and it's time for us to figure out how we can work safely. And you're helping us as Earnscliffe deal with that issue. Can you maybe comment, on how we proceed? What's going to get us back to work? How do we convince the government that we are part of the solution? And what are the steps? What are the next steps that we can unify everybody in a common messaging?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Tony, you know, we've talked about this many a time. I think that again, going back to my kind of opening comments, that one of the most important things right now is to assure the government that if they do open you up, that you can do it safely and that you're not going to compromise the health of Ontarians and Canadians. I think that can be done. You're already ahead of the game, I think, working on protocols in terms of how you can work safe, whether that's, making sure that each one of the contractors, whatever equipment that the guys and girls that are working on your sites are using is their own equipment. It's not being mixed. That they're traveling to site if they're off site in their own vehicles and not sharing spaces. That they're maintaining social distancing, but having those rules and assuring the government and demonstrating to them that you can open safely will be, I think, the most important part. I think, from my understanding, and certainly from an Ontarian's perspective, there's a lot of talk about people wanting to get out in their gardens right now. They want to access kind of the retail. Certainly the retail operations can offer no contact delivery right now. There's no restrictions on that, but there's lots of other things that certainly in terms of retail operations that they're going to have to provide some assurances on. So the more robust information that we can provide to the government on how all of your members can be able to work safely, and that includes the greenhouse operations, and keep Ontarians safe, the more confidence that the government is going to have in reopening the business. I mean, let's face it, they want to reopen the economy and they want businesses operating and people at work for mental health reasons, but also for economic reasons. But they have to do that with the lens of, are we going to be hurting people? So the more we can do this week, Tony, to kind of provide that information into government, the better. And then ideally, when they are reevaluating which lists can be open and which ones are not, they will have a defensible position if they are asked by anyone or any neighbor that's reporting into 311, why'd you open landscaping? Why is is spraying for weeds an essential service? That they'll be able to say, we are taking responsible steps to keep our economy moving, and we know that these operations can operate safely and keep Ontarians safe. If they can respond that way, they'll be able to have the cover to start opening up different industries. It's got to be authentic and it's got to be true.
I think, Tony, it's helpful for the members on this, or the viewers on this call, and to share why Julie's here. The task force, as early as yesterday, took the approach of the moving forward in a positive way to work with sector groups to come up with those protocols. Maybe with your help, Julie, reaching out to Rod Phillips as he's chair of this new committee struck by the provincial government and the premier announced at the end of last week to make sure we're at the table. They want to work with industry groups to make sure those protocols are in place and they have the right information to move forward when that time is right.
Yep, exactly. And happy to help and facilitate those conversations. Monty McNaughton's also on that list, and certainly we've been working very closely with him as well. OMAFRA has been taking a lot of, that's the Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. Sorry, I went back to my old government hat in acronym land. They've also been very interested in what the association has been saying, and Minister Hardeman's been an advocate for the industry.
Julie, our time's up, and I just want to thank you and thank all of the task force members for your service and your help. And I want to also thank all of the attendees as well. I know we could probably go on for a couple hours, but I think we'll stop for now. And just as just some words, it's been painful to watch the division that the COVID crisis is causing within our membership. I mean, it's time that we reduce the division and come together in a common effort to convince the government that we, as a unified profession, can and will be part of the solution. Now that the COVID crisis appears to be waning, we need to focus our efforts on letting the government and the public know how essential we are. We have an unprecedented opportunity for our entire membership to mobilize our considerable communication potential in a common effort to tell our essential story to the government, to our clients, and to the public. But that essential story must be predicated by safety, a safety message. We have never had a bigger stage to shout out the benefits of what we do for a living. In the coming few days, we'll be providing you with the templates and suggesting messaging. Few other professions can deliver the environmental, aesthetic, lifestyle, therapeutic, economic, mental health, physical health, spiritual, legacy, and many other life-enhancing benefits we collectively offer. We make people happy. Spring is coming. Now is the time for us to work together. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks for listening to the Landscape Ontario podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, we hope you'll subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to get new episodes every month. And if you have an idea for the show, please email me at scott@landscapeontario.com. Thanks for listening.